this is Kieran with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze, You Are Special. Now, many of you know there's another podcast called Avoid the Maze. I do both of them. This one, I bring in people who I think are special, and John happens to be one of those because as I've read in your bio, John, you've written books, you're talking about family values. And I haven't heard that term since maybe the time that I was growing up in the 50s and 60s. We sort of
Right.
let that drop by the wayside. Um, my belief is we let it drop because so many of us growing up in that time frame felt that, hey, we want to do it different than our parents. And I know that was part of my mothering when my two were young.
Okay.
And now I look back at it and going, there was a lot of value in what my parents did. And I'm now trying to introduce that as my two sons are in their 30s and 40s. And luckily, they listen and they understand it. So let's talk about before AI tries to bug us, AI just tends to show up on my screen. So I want to get rid of that. Okay. Yeah, we're living in a world where everything becomes automated. But um, let's talk about the fact that you've written a number of books. What got you into writing to begin with? Is this something that you saw as a career path?
Um, Not really. I have 42 years that I spent in the public schools doing various things. I was a teacher, taught kindergarten all the way to eighth grade. I was a counselor for many, many years, a guidance counselor in the elementary schools. I had a Christian marriage and family practice also. Um, And I was also a part-time administrator. I did some administrative work with gifted kids and so on and making things happen for them. So I have a lot of experiences in there. And during my time as a counselor, I did develop a couple of programs, one called Peer Pals. Wrote that, and it became a very excellent program. It was about older kids helping younger kids in the elementary school. So you'd have fourth, fifth, and sixth graders going down to the kindergarten, first and second. They were reading, doing math. They were getting to know them. They were big brothers, big sisters. They gave up their recess actually, and their lunchtime, part of their lunchtime, to be able to do that. And that was really a rewarding program. And then I was fortunate enough to get a Fulbright scholarship to Japan, which was just a wonderful experience. I spent a month and a half there looking at their elementary, middle, high school businesses and all kinds of things. It was all expenses paid, and they just threw out the red carpet and learned a lot. And when I came back, I was so moved by that. I wrote a program called Super Student, being successful in school, and was actually a program for teachers to help kids learn how to be good students. But there was also information there about parenting and parents helping out. And that was a very successful program. I spoke a lot across the United States about it. And um, the idea of parenting, continued to grow, especially through that Christian marriage and family. So what I did was take a lot of stuff from that super student program, and we just finished two books, short books, and I have a third one that's ready to be published. And then I put all three together. It's called Power Parenting. But basically what it is how parents can nurture their children to become successful students. But along the way, they grow also, and they grow with their spouse, they grow personally, and they obviously are going to see some effect on their children becoming better students. So that's the focus of those particular books, and that's the writing we have done. We've also done children's books, but that reinforced the family values.
Sure. It's interesting because I have two sons. One is in his late 40s, one's in his early 30s. So big gender gap, age gap there. Um,
Right.
However, my youngest son, when he was 6 years old, was diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And I
Yes.
share this story a lot because he went to school one day, he was neurotypical. The teacher noticed some attributes that he had, called in the school counselor. Before we knew it, we were told, you need to get your son to a doctor. We need a diagnosis. Don't come back to school till you have one. And I said, well, like, what did you see? Well, we think your child's autistic. So I went home and read up about autism and it was like, well, I don't see it. We got him into a doctor, and this was in the early ages of the 1990s when autism still was like 1 out of 150 individuals.
Right.
Nobody had a clear understanding. But all of a sudden, my husband and I were expected to become different type of parents, and he was expected to become a different type of child. And the reality was that he was so high functioning. For years, he fought us. Okay.
Hmm.
He didn't want the specialties. He just wanted to be a kid and grow up and do his lessons and do everything. And it wasn't until he was in his 20s that I finally found the training that I could have used when he was younger. The problem is that I think I mentioned earlier, we sort of forgot what family values were because we were working so much on this new concept of we have to treat this autism.
Right.
The reality is autism is just part of life. So I love the fact that you are writing these books and you're helping parents and children navigate as we move forward because there's no perfect way to navigate through life. We got to make some
No,
mistakes.
I'm so glad you said that because even your program, Avoiding the Maze, um, as you and I were talking before the show, there's so many different ways to go through a maze, okay, to finally get to the center or the pretty part, where the fountain is and all the rest. And we have to find that as parents, okay? Now, as you know, parenting is there's so many different situations in parenting. Um, the relationship between the spouse is very important. Um, the relationship that they have with their child, they may have many children, they may have one. So all of those dynamics are different in every family, every situation.
Right.
So yes, that's why talking about parenting and giving good advice is somewhat problematic. However, there are some basics that are really, really, really important. I came up with, and there's more, and there's other people that have come up with these same things, but 6 strategies or 6 things you should prize that will really help your child become a better student, nurturing them for success, and also improve your life as a parent. If you're doing it yourself, some parents out there might be saying, "Well, gee, my husband doesn't take any interest in any of this. I'm doing it all myself." Or the husband may be saying it. Um, it's nice when both parents are on the same path and goal, but as you know, that isn't always the case in today's world. It's difficult. It's difficult.
Well, it's interesting because when my youngest son was growing up, my husband and I were both in the IT world, and
Okay.
he would travel for a week and I was home. Then I would travel for a week and he was home.
Right.
It wasn't until my son was in his 20s and he said, you and dad did me an injustice. I'm not mad, but you did me an injustice. And I said, why? He said, because for 2 years, I either had one parent or another, and your styles were so dynamically different.
Right.
I would come
Right.
in and it's time to get up for school, it's time to brush your teeth. You know, I was the
Boom.
drill sergeant. His dad would be like, Oh, we're running late. Well, I guess we're going to go stop and have a donut for breakfast. Oh, I'm going to
Mhm.
drive you to school.
Exactly.
And he said he didn't know how to adapt from week to week. And then when our situation changed and we were both working in town, that's when he became a little bit more vocal against us because he didn't have the fun dad every other week. And he saw that my husband and I were sort of butting heads. When I would say, well, it's time to go to bed, my husband might say, well, give him another 5 minutes.
Right. So that conflict, that difference was
Right.
confusing
And
him. He wanted
my
more
husband,
consistency.
and we didn't realize we were doing that. We
Sure.
were just totally oblivious to it. It was like, okay, so he's going to have another 5 minutes.
Well, I've heard you talk about your children before on other podcasts, so you must have been doing something right. And those those are the key strategies we're talking about that are so important. One thing I want to say about this for your listeners out there, I compare parenting a little bit to golf. Do you golf? Have you ever golfed?
No, I haven't. I've used to
Okay.
watch my father come home angry after a golf games.
Okay. Well, some parents are like that at the end of the day. But yeah, golf is a good comparison, though. It's different than competition ice skating. If you ever watch the competition ice skating, and they're beautiful to watch and so on. But if they slip once or they fall once, their chances of winning are very, very low. Okay. And twice, forget it. Okay. They're out of the game. But in golf, if you at least know something about golf, you have 18 holes. And if you do poorly on the first hole, it's okay. You can go to the next hole and try to do better there. So you get all kinds of chances in golf. You get the chances on each hole, a swing. Oh, it went in the woods. Don't worry, we'll lay out another ball. Try it again. Okay. So, and that's the way parenting is. You get chance after chance after chance after chance after chance to do it right. And your kids will help you along the way, trying to show you what is right, what is good. If you're a good listener, if you're a good observer, and you have those basic things, like number one, for example, cultivating genuine love and sincerity, how to do that, really loving your children, caring for them. I don't mean with your mouth, I mean with what you're doing, okay? Kids are more impressed by watching you. They catch those values. We were talking about family values. They catch those values by watching, observing, and seeing if there's contradictions to what you're saying and what you're doing. So there's where the growth comes in, okay, for yourself. You know, it's amazing. You have really two, or if you're lucky, three times to grow up as a person. The first time when you're in your own family, you didn't choose that family, you're born. And that's your first time. You have a mind, and after a while, you get to say, "What? This looks right. This looks wrong.
Right.
This looks good. This looks bad. No, I don't think it's right that we hurt people. We see them crying, and I wouldn't want to, that's the first time. The second time is when you're raising your own child. And you can probably, Karen, agree with this. As you are raising your child from a little child and they're moving up into elementary, then they're middle school, and then they're teenagers. That's when I love when Mark Twain said, when they get to be 12 years old, you need to put them in a barrel. And then when they're 13, you would have a knot in it, a knot hole. And then when you're 13, you need to take a cork and stick it in that knot hole. And but uh, but yeah, during that time, you have a chance to improve yourself also as as your child catches you on certain things. When they say, for example, they see you not being honest or being truthful, or lying or stealing or hurting your husband or wife, the way they talk to each other, and then you're telling the child they need to be kind and loving, and so that's the second time for you to grow, if you allow it. If you allow it. There's a cute little YouTube video that shows a little girl sitting in the car, and her mom says to the father who's getting ready to drive, she says, "Honey, before you start the car, take a look at Sally's little dress. Isn't it pretty, her outfit?" And she had a cute little outfit. She's a gorgeous child. And it was like showing her belly button area. It stopped, right by the belly button. Then the pants went down. So he looked at her and said, "Oh yes, it's very pretty." But he said, "That skin, that's a big girl thing." And she looked and she said, What, Daddy? What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, you don't, big girls, they do that. You shouldn't have that shirt like that. It should come all the way down." And she said, "Well, I've seen you wash the car with your friends and your buddies, and you have your pants in the back down and shows your crack." And she said, "Is that a big guy thing?" And
Loved it.
the father reacted beautifully though to it. Okay, instead of getting mad like, "You don't talk to me like that. We can do what you," he said, he laughed, and he said, "You're right, honey. You got me. That's not, it's not right. I should have my pants all the way up, and you're absolutely right." And then she laughed and so on. But see, that little moment was a teachable moment. That was a growing moment for Dad. He'll probably keep his pants up now from now on. And it was a growing moment for the child, realizing that her father can take some laugh, he can learn. He asked for forgiveness. So that's what I'm talking about. So cultivating genuine love and sincerity is number one. What is love, though? That's the whole thing in a family. Just what is that? Mother and father doing their own thing and leaving the kids to be raised by someone else, like the state or the school or a neighbor or some nursery school or something like that, or the church. No, parents were designed, they were made to be raised or to raise children. Okay, children were that was the crucible that children are supposed to develop in when we talk about family values. And the values they see in that home, that's what they're going to catch. That's what they're going to use. Okay, that's what they're going to use in life. Okay, so that's just an example of one of the strategies that we talk about.
Well, I have to tell you that that is so poignant right now because my son thought that we were in some ways being overprotective. We knew too much about him in high school, although there were things that we really did not know.
Mm,
Um, but we were very involved. He had a bully in high school who came from a very wealthy family, and the parents were always traveling somewhere. And so he was either with caregivers or other family, but even in high school, he and his younger brother stayed home alone while the parents traveled.
right.
Um, and my son many times would say, "Wow, I wish we were more like them." And I would look at him and go, "Really? What do you like about that?" "Well, look, he gets to drive his dad's, Mercedes when his dad's out of town." And he saw all the special things that teenagers would see. About 5 years after high school, it came out that this young man died of an overdose.
Mm,
And then it came out from my son that he had been molested by this young man.
wow.
And I share this because we were very involved. My son knew that he didn't want to upset what he thought was the apple cart at the time. He didn't want us to judge him for what had happened. And he knew that this kid and his family were influential, and he didn't want to cause any additional harm, as he put it. And it took him all that time. When this happened, he finally said, "I now have to tell you something."
Wow.
So that's when I knew that we really had raised a very smart young man. I felt badly that he had to hold it in all that time,
Right.
but he did put himself into therapy right away. I put myself into therapy because I was blaming myself initially. And the reality was that love is what brought us together, for him to get
Right.
his treatment, me to get mine. As as a counselor, so you said you did counseling in the church, right? Christian
Well,
counseling.
I did it at my home, in the evenings or something like that. Uh, I was a school counselor during the day, and and of course, summer I had off in the summer, so I would do family counseling then too. Yes, go ahead.
So, as a counselor, so many parents feel that they know it all. They don't need the counseling. Do they
Right.
come to the counseling because of the child, or did you see them more coming for themselves more than for the child?
Um, all these things are so wrapped together that that's the whole thing. That when you have a person coming for counseling, you know as a counselor, and all a counselor is a helper, a listener,
Right,
and trying to give a person to look at various things that maybe they didn't think about before. But they carry. We all do. Every single one of us has baggage. Okay, there's no one that goes through life unscathed. It's like running through a briar patch. Running through a briar patch, you are going to get cut. That's what life is like.
right.
Okay. So you're going to be scarred. You're going to be bleeding. You're going to have problems with that. Okay. So everyone brings baggage. Depending on your situation, the family you were raised in, how you were treated, where you are in your sibling, were you the only child, were you the first child, the middle, all those, and also how you took it, okay? Two children can go through the same thing and they can be different. One can be an optimist and a pessimist. So your own personal makeup as you're born, okay, your personality as it develops, but also you're born with a certain kind of temperament in a certain way. So how you take things are important. So you have this person come to you in counseling, as you've mentioned, and they are bringing baggage with their spouse, with their children, with their father, with their mother, and everything else. And you're looking at the whole picture kind of and asking questions about them to look at things. Yeah, one thing you cannot do is go back and relive your life. You can't, the past is the past. The only thing you have control about is the present, that certain moment right there, what you're going to say next to the children, to the child, to your husband, how you're going to try to change your own life. Okay. It's work. It's work because these things are so ingrained. There's so much part that you have to kind of look at things in a different way. So the same as it is with trying to work with your child to be a better student. You're going to have to look at things a little bit different about how you're treating, the way you're talking, the way you're acting. And it's hard. You fight in yourself. You fight two natures, one that is selfish, okay, wants to do its own
Right.
thing, and another one that is loving and kind and unselfish. And these two are constantly in war with each other. So you have some parents, they haven't done anything with their kids. They work all the time. They make lots of money. They go and do their own life. They kind of think maybe it's the wife's job or maybe the nanny's job or maybe someone else's job, the school's job to raise. They're maybe mad they had the child. Uh, all these kinds of things play into it. But there is no more important job than raising your child. That's the whole thing. That is your legacy right there. That will come back to bite you, okay? Like
Absolutely.
look at how you said your kids are in their 30s and 40s. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do they have children?
No, both of them
Okay.
are still single, very much into their careers.
Okay, that's fine, but you have a relationship still with them, okay? Now
Yes.
they may decide to have children later on and so on, and now you're a grandmother then, okay?
Yep.
And so they are going to be looking at their children, raising their children. Probably they're going to start by looking at either how they were raised or they're going to do the opposite,
Right.
okay? Very few people don't have the insight to be able to say, I was treated a certain way. I'm not going to treat my child that way. My father was one of the few people like that. God love him. I tell you, his life was terrible. It was unbelievable. And at one point when I was old enough, I said, Dad, I know you had a difficult life and so on, but you love us and you're so loving. And, how is it? He said, John, I did everything that wasn't done to me. Now,
Interesting.
that's an
Yes,
unusual person, okay, to be able to do
absolutely.
that, to have insight to do that. But you see, your boys will not leave you, okay? You're going to be with them till the grave, and that is your legacy. Those kids will carry their memories about you, their feelings about you, and they will be laying that on their children. And as a parent, any of your parents listening out there, I don't know. You can build a business, you can build a corporation, you can do all these different kinds of things. It's fine. You can have friends but your children are different. It's different. So you need to be spending a lot of time nurturing, working with that, and making that work, okay? Because it's going to come back to you, right?
Absolutely.
Jane and I were fortunate to have two sons. They're in their 50s right now. We have three grandchildren. One is 21, one is 17, one is 14. They're the joys of our life. In fact, our children's books are all about those kids and grandchildren. We tried to leave a legacy uh, of of books about our kids and our family values that we're talking about. And we put it in writing, and that's why we started doing these books because they become part of the family legacy story, and we laugh about them and all the rest. So those kinds of things build relationship. And they can share them with their children. Say, Grandpa and Grandma wrote these stories, and this is the way we used to live. This is you get what I'm saying?
I absolutely do. It's interesting because I always thought I loved both of my parents, but I always thought my mother and I had this love-hate relationship. My
Right.
mother, she had certain expectations that she expected of me more than she did her boys.
Okay.
But I always heard the negative when she spoke to me. Don't know why, but I did. My mother, 8 years ago, had a stroke, and she lived in Michigan. I went from Ohio to Michigan, and the doctor said she could have a day, she could have a week, she could have years. We don't know. She
Right.
lost her sight with the stroke, but
Right.
initially she still had a clear mind, everything else. So I said, well, I'm going to move in with her. I'm going to take care of her. And,
Wow.
uh, I left my family behind because we could see that it wasn't going to be long term, but it was going to be some length of time.
Right.
But I learned in a very short period of time that we didn't have a love hate relationship. We truly had a love relationship. I learned so much from her. That's why I was there taking care of her. I, she had taught me that. Okay.
Mm.
If you would have asked me the day before she had her stroke if I'd ever be my mother's caregiver, I would have said, there's no way. You know, I can't be that intimate with my mother.
Right.
But it happened and all this came out. And I realized how important she was to me. And my sons saw that. It was like, we understand.
Wow.
Wow, that's how you are. And my youngest son, when he moved away 2 years ago for a job, he said, I'm going to call you every day, Mom. And I looked at him, I said, sure you will. No, you won't, but that's okay. He calls me every day.
Wow. So, this says something about you, Karen. It really does. But you're bringing out a very important point that your listeners need to hear, and that is, and yeah, to go back to one of your guests that talked about anger, okay, and that same thing. You don't know everything that's going on in a person's life and to act the way they are acting towards you.
Right.
Okay, now when you're a child, you really don't know, but as you're getting to be a young adult and then an adult, you can, if you think about it and look at the insights of what caused them to treat you that way. What happened to their mother and father, your grandparents, what were the things in their life that cause them to treat you a certain way, to treat you maybe ugly or mean or nasty or belittle you, or, what was it? Okay. But there were things that did that. Okay. Now, it's true they went along with it and everything else, but we don't know everything that's going on in a person's life. And so we need to think about that when we are looking at our children, first of all. Like, what's going on at school? School is their job. That's what they do.
Right.
And we don't know who they're meeting, the bullies they're meeting, the people that are talking trash to them, what's happening, how that teacher is treating them, what feelings they have about the subjects they're taking, how they feel smart, problems, they don't like this subject, is the people calling them stupid, dumb. We don't know what they're bringing home, okay? And so listening and asking questions, that's a big start right there. That shows your love, okay?
Right.
And so, and the same it is with marriages, how they break up and so on. What's going on in your husband's life? What's going on in your life? Are you talking? Are you communicating? Are you aware of each other's needs? Are you trying to meet each other's needs? Are you open to what they're going through? Are you sympathetic, empathetic? Are you loving? Are you kind? And you might say, yeah, I'm doing all those things, and he's still doing his own thing. Well, that happens. That's true. That does happen. Maybe he needs a wake-up call. And you're being treated a certain way, but the only behavior you can control really is
Yeah,
yourself.
absolutely.
You can't, I can't control your behavior. I can affect your behavior by the way I act, but I can't really control your behavior. That's on you. Okay, that's your responsibility.
I'm
Um,
glad you brought that up because my husband his IT job, he had to work overnight last night. And this morning he called me looking for something in his overnight bag.
right.
And I first was taking responsibility for it, but I stopped myself. It was like,
I'm gonna say why? Yeah,
I said,
why?
if it's not there, then I guess you forgot it. What a relief that was for me. It didn't cause an argument. My past behavior had been, well, I know I put it there, you just got to look harder and would
Right.
cause an argument. This time was like, you know, I'm not responsible. I'm sorry you don't have it. And I gave him a couple of options of how he could possibly resolve it.
Right.
And he thought about it. And he called me about an hour and a half later when he went to work. And he said, I stopped at the discount store. I got what I needed. Um, Thanks for the lead. And it was like, and those are things that I have learned over the years.
Good.
When I was
Good.
younger,
It wouldn't have happened.
wouldn't have happened. But
Yeah.
in today's world, we can walk around angry all the time, or we can find the solutions.
Yes. Yes. Let me read something to you, okay? I
Sure.
think it might hit home to what we're talking about. Charles Swindoll is a famous and very prolific writer uh, in the Christian community. And listen to what he says. The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me is more important than facts. It's more important than the past, than education, than money, than circumstances, than failures, than successes, than what other people think or say or do. It is more important than the appearance, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a company, a church, or a home. The remarkable thing is we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we will embrace for that day. We cannot change our past. We cannot change the fact that people will act in a certain way. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play on the one string we have, and that is our attitude. I'm convinced that life is 10% of what happens to me and 90% of how I react to it. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitudes. Once you understand that you own your attitude, that you can control it, that you can respond lovingly and kind to something, understandingly, or just quiet, and you can be quiet for a while and think before you talk. You've gained a great deal of real estate. Okay. You've gained a great secret. So before you just respond to something as a parent with your child or your spouse, uh, think, my attitude, how should I handle my attitude right now? If I'm mad, I feel mad, I'm going to be quiet and walk away. I'm going to think a little bit. I'm going to take a deep breath and just walk away a little bit. I'm going to come back to it later. Let it settle for a minute. So Charles Swindoll was so influential in us writing these books, especially the super student program, but also this parenting information. Because once a person knows they're responsible for their attitude, then you have ownership of it. You own it, and that you can change it. You can move it one way or the other. It doesn't own you, you own it. So control here is very important. How you react. Um, I think I think uh, I think that's important in parenting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My father used to always drill that into us. If I was a crier growing up, and he'd look
Okay,
at me and he'd say, well, you can keep crying and feel sad, or you can find something to smile about. And I would look at him thinking like he was totally crazy. And he would just drop little hints like, the sun is shining outside. Oh, we're going to go for ice cream tomorrow, whatever it was.
right.
And all of a sudden, my tears would dry up. I didn't learn those tools until I got older.
Mm.
He was my tool. Okay. When he'd see me crying, he would bring it up. But as I got older, he said to me one day, there was the one thing about you I did not like when you were growing up. He said, but it was something that you had to grow out of. You had to figure it out. And he
Right.
asked me what it was. And I said, when I feel sad, I think about your words.
Well, see that you had some insight there, okay? But and in his case, and this is good, he modeled that probably, but also he allowed you to finally find your own way with it. And that's
Exactly.
and that's what we have to do with our children, okay? You have to model it. You can't expect your child to learn something if you're not doing it, okay? I'm sorry, but I'm just
Exactly.
going to be straight up with your listeners and so on. If you want your child to be honest and you're a thief, you lie and you cheat and you steal and you talk trash on the phone and they don't expect your kids to do better than you, okay?
Absolutely. You are
I mean,
right.
they would have to have tremendous insight to know that what I love mommy anyway, but she's a liar, or I love daddy anyway, but I know he doesn't always tell the truth. He says he loves me, but he's always working all the time. He never spends any time with me. He never takes me any place. We never do anything together. You know, don't expect kids to be good and listen to you and take your advice when when you're not involved and you're doing the opposite what you're asking them to do. So kids aren't stupid, they
Oh,
really are. They are not. They see what's going on. They know what how they're being treated. So that that is really good. Another one of the key things we talk about is being encouraging and passionate in your parenting. Love your parenting. I mean, just I know there's days are going to be frustrating. Some days are going to say, "Oh, golly, I can't wait till this day is over." The kid is driving me crazy. You're going to think that. Don't say it, but think it, okay? And then go take a walk and take a deep breath and realize that this is a short time. It's a short time in a child's life, too. I mean, what are we talking about? 15 years, 18 years? By the time they're 18, that 21-year-old grandson, I'm saying he's pretty much on his own,
yeah.
okay? I mean, the damage is done, okay? He's on his own. You talk to him like a. So, and then a 17-year-old granddaughter we have, the same with her. You're not going to talk with them the same as you are with a little 3, 4, 5-year-old.
Right.
So it's a short time. That's what I'm trying to say. Then it's gone.
Yep.
See? So enjoy it,
Absolutely.
enjoy it.
You are so right. So
Yeah.
how can my listeners find your books and uh, get more encouragement from you on parenting?
Yeah, we have a nice website. Okay. It's part of our publishing thing, and it's a www.mjchanaca, that's Chanaca, publishing, publishing.com. And
Okay.
on that website, we'll have all the books and information, our story. And, we have a 96-year-old, I have a 96-year-old mother-in-law living with us. She's in a wheelchair and she's got Alzheimer's. And during the COVID time, about 2.5, 3 years ago, we were stuck. We couldn't go any place anyway because she's 24/7. We have to watch.
Sure.
And there's that attitude thing. We could have said, oh, gee, here we are. What are we going to do? Now we had the time and we have the money. So we said, we're at a stage in our life. Let's write books. Let's write some. So that's what we've been doing for 2.5 years.
How wonderful.
All the money we make from that, we're giving away for the book. Any money that we make that's profit, we're donating away. We're donating it. So, God gives us so many chances and we have so many opportunities to serve and be involved and make impressions on people's lives. Let's do it. I'm 77 years old. How many more years am I going to live? Okay. So we're trying to do as much as we can
I
until
appreciate that.
until God takes us. That's it.
Well,
So
you are a realization to so many people that there once was a time when you would give out your age, people would look at it as like, oh, you're at the end of life. And I remember in my last corporate job, I was just hitting 60 or 61. I think it was 60. And they started whispering to me about, when are you going to retire? When are you going to retire? Now, I
Yeah.
loved what I did. I hated the culture that I was working in, but
Yeah.
loved what I did.
Yeah.
And I had no desire to leave. Um, but I was the oldest one on my corporate campus. So it was like, yeah, I could see why they were saying that. However, the day that I was sort of kicked out the door is when I started my new life, is when I
Man.
said, you know what? I
What?
don't know how many more days or years I have, but I'm going to live them to the
There
fullest.
you go.
And
That's
that's
the
what you
truth.
and your wife are doing, and that is
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yes, as long as you have breath, as long as you can get up, thank God you can walk, you can breathe, as long as you can move around, okay, and do things, do it. Be
Absolutely.
involved, do it. Because you want to be able to say, I lived a good life. I have no regrets.
You got it.
I have no regrets, I gave it all. I did everything I could do, and I had a ball doing it. So, your listeners, I hope they go to work today and get a big smile and say, this is a beautiful day. I've got this day to live. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, John. I will be in touch, and you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Great, great work with your podcast. Keep it up.
Thank you. Bye bye now.